A single photograph. Two small children. A quiet green estate. A bouquet of flowers. It looks, at first glance, like nothing at all, just a mother sharing a tender moment with her kids. But within hours, that one image had royal insiders whispering, columnists reaching for words like vulgar, and reports claiming one future king was, quite simply, furious. This is the story of how a single Instagram post reignited one of the deepest wounds in the modern British monarchy. A wound that traces back not to Meghan Markle, but to a princess who died nearly 30 years ago, in a tunnel in Paris, trying to escape the very cameras her family has spent decades trying to protect her memory from. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why a bouquet of flowers became the most controversial bouquet in royal history. To understand why this photograph caused such an uproar, you have to understand two things. Who Princess Diana was to the British public, and where, exactly, this photo was taken. Princess Diana wasn't just a royal. She was, in many ways, the most photographed woman of the 20th century, and the most hunted. Paparazzi followed her constantly, sometimes for a single candid shot worth a fortune. That hunger for images of her never fully went away, even after her death in 1997. If anything, her passing only made the appetite for anything connected to her more intense. So when her family made the decision, all those years ago, to bury her not in a public churchyard, but on a private island within the grounds of Althorp, her family's ancestral estate in Northamptonshire, it wasn't just tradition. It was protection. A final, deliberate act to keep her resting place away from tourists, cameras, and the kind of spectacle that had defined, and arguably ended, her life. That island. That privacy. That's the backdrop for everything that happened next. Fast forward to today, and Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, Diana's daughter-in-law by marriage, though the two never met in life, shared a photograph on her Instagram account. In it, her two children, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, are seen walking through the grounds of Althorp. Archie is holding a bouquet of flowers. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots. Flowers. Diana's childhood home. Her grandchildren, whom she never lived to meet. The natural conclusion many viewers reached was that Meghan and her children had visited Diana's grave, and that this photo was taken during, or just after, that visit. For some, it was touching. A quiet way of honoring a grandmother the children never got to know. But for a growing number of royal watchers, commentators, and, according to reports, even members of the family itself, it landed very differently. Let's walk through how this unfolded. Step 1. The post itself. Meghan shared the image publicly, with no caption spelling out exactly where the children were or why. That ambiguity, deliberate or not, left the internet to fill in the blanks. And the internet, as it often does, filled them in fast. Step 2. The backlash begins. Almost immediately, criticism started pouring in online. Commentators accused Meghan of using her children, and Diana's memory, as content. Others felt the image crossed a line that even the family's most senior, most publicity-savvy members had never crossed. Because here's the thing that fueled the outrage more than anything else, Prince William, Diana's own son, has reportedly taken his 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, to visit their grandmother's grave as well. Multiple times, in fact, over the years. But there's a key difference. No photographs of those visits have ever been made public. Not one. Step 3. The columnist weighs in. That contrast is exactly what caught the attention of Maureen Callahan, a Daily Mail columnist known for her sharp commentary on the royal family. In a pointed opinion piece, Callahan didn't hold back. She described William and Catherine as people who understand that certain things are simply sacred, people who, in her words, would never turn Diana's grave into what she called a tourist attraction or a commodity. She went further, branding Meghan's decision to share the photo as an act she considered vulgar, and even suggested it may have been something closer to defiance than sentiment. That word, defiance, is worth pausing on. Because according to Callahan, this wasn't happening in a vacuum. Step 4. The context behind the timing. Just weeks earlier, Prince Harry and Meghan had reportedly met with King Charles. And according to reports surrounding that meeting, no photographs were permitted. Not one image from that reunion, assuming reconciliation was even truly on the table, was ever released to the public. So when Meghan posted this Althorp photo shortly after, some saw it as coincidence. Others, like Callahan, floated a very different theory, that if Meghan wasn't allowed to control the narrative around her meeting with the king, she may have chosen to control the narrative somewhere else entirely, on ground that belonged to Diana. Step 5. Old wounds resurface. This wasn't the first time Meghan's choices around Diana's memory had drawn criticism. Callahan's piece also referenced an earlier incident, a video Meghan had shared of herself relaxing in a car, filmed near the location associated with Diana's death in Paris. That moment reportedly left Prince William furious at the time, and it was dredged back up now as part of a pattern critics believe they are seeing. Think about that for a second. To most people watching from the outside, a car ride is just a car ride. But location matters. Context matters. And when the location in question is tied, even loosely, to the place where a beloved princess died in front of the world's cameras, a mundane clip becomes something else entirely. It becomes a symbol. And symbols, in the world of royal reporting, carry a weight that ordinary content simply doesn't. That's precisely why critics like Callahan didn't treat the Althorp photo as an isolated incident. In her view, it fit a pattern, a willingness, whether intentional or not, to place herself and her children in proximity to the most emotionally charged corners of Diana's story, and then to publicize that proximity to millions of followers. Step 6. The palace's silence. Perhaps just as telling as anything said out loud is what wasn't said at all. Buckingham Palace, as is almost always the case with matters concerning the Sussexes, offered no official comment. No statement, no confirmation, no denial, no context. That silence is itself a familiar pattern, the institution's long-standing method of neither engaging with nor legitimizing stories it would rather starve of oxygen. But silence from the palace rarely means silence from the public. Into that vacuum poured op-eds, social media debates, and no shortage of speculation about what William, in particular, might be feeling behind palace walls. Taken together, the car video, the Althorp photo, the timing after the Charles meeting, and the palace's studied silence, a narrative began to form. Whether or not it's the full picture, it's the one that dominated headlines in the days that followed. The response online was swift and, frankly, brutal for Meghan. Comment sections filled with users accusing her of exploiting her children for engagement. Others defended her, arguing that a mother sharing a moment with her kids at their great-grandmother-in-law's childhood home shouldn't be treated as a scandal at all, that the outrage said more about the public's appetite for controversy than about anything Meghan actually did. But the loudest voices, at least in this news cycle, were the critical ones. And when a royal commentator with Callahan's platform uses a word like vulgar, it doesn't just fade quietly. It becomes the headline. It becomes the story people repeat to their friends, the clip that gets shared, the take that shapes how millions of casual observers view the Sussexes going forward. And that's really the heart of this ongoing saga, isn't it? Every choice Meghan makes is filtered through a lens of suspicion by her critics, and a lens of sympathy by her supporters. There's very little middle ground left. To really understand why this story exploded the way it did, you need to understand the emotional weight Diana still carries within the royal institution, nearly 3 decades after her death. Diana wasn't just King Charles's first wife. She was the people's princess. Her death in 1997 triggered one of the most extraordinary outpourings of public grief Britain has ever seen. Flowers piled feet deep outside Kensington Palace, a nation in mourning, a monarchy visibly shaken by how disconnected it seemed from public emotion in that moment. Her sons, William and Harry, grew up in the shadow of that grief, and in the shadow of the press intrusion that many believe contributed to her death. That's precisely why Althorp's private island burial was so significant. It was the family saying, enough. No more cameras near her. No more turning her into a spectacle. So when a photograph, any photograph, emerges that even hints at her grave being visited, photographed, and shared publicly, it doesn't just touch a nerve. It touches the nerve. The one nerve the family has spent almost 30 years trying to protect. For William in particular, reports over the years have consistently suggested he's fiercely protective of his mother's memory and privacy, arguably more so than any other member of his family. He was 15 when she died. He walked behind her coffin, in full view of the world's cameras, at an age when most teenagers are worrying about exams, not burying a parent on live television. That single, searing image, a grieving boy forced to grieve publicly, has been cited by royal historians again and again as the moment that shaped William's now well-documented wariness of the press, and his intense desire to give his own children a childhood shielded from that same exposure. Which is exactly why, according to these reports, seeing his own children's cousins photographed near that same sacred ground, in a manner he and Catherine have reportedly never permitted for their own 3 children, would sting in a very particular way. It wouldn't just be about optics. It would touch something far more personal. The fear that the lesson he took from his mother's death, the lesson about protecting children from public spectacle, might not be shared by everyone in his extended family. It's also worth remembering how Diana herself is remembered by the wider public, not simply as a royal figure, but as a mother first. She was famously hands-on, famously informal, famously determined to give William and Harry as normal a childhood as the position allowed, taking them to theme parks and fast food restaurants in an era when royal children rarely appeared outside formal engagements. That image of Diana as a devoted, present, protective mother is part of why any perceived commercialization of her memory lands so heavily with the public. It cuts against everything she seemed to represent. This is a family, remember, that communicates through gestures and silences as much as through words. Public statements are rare. Private disagreements are handled, when possible, behind closed doors. And in that language, a public photograph where private restraint has always been the unspoken rule speaks volumes, arguably louder than any press release ever could. So where does that leave things now? According to multiple reports circling around this same period, the broader relationship between Harry and the rest of the royal family remains fragile, complicated, and, depending on who you ask, either slowly healing or quietly deteriorating further. One source close to the situation suggested that Harry himself never truly wanted the estrangement from his family in the first place. That in the early days of his relationship with Meghan, he was, in the source's words, blinded by love enough to choose her over everything else. But the same source suggested that things are shifting now, describing it as a kind of veil lifting. There have also been reports, dating back over the past year, describing Harry as increasingly homesick for the UK. A friend from his old school days reportedly told a British outlet that Harry, known to close friends by the nickname Spike, had been reaching out more and more, sending long, heartfelt messages that were such a departure from his usual tone that his friends made a conscious decision not to tease him about it, the way they might have in the past. That same friend noted something else, something almost quietly poignant. Whenever anyone from that old friend group travels to the United States, they try to see Harry. But notably, it's never described as time spent with Meghan. It's just Harry. Which has led some close to him to believe he's pining, more and more, for a version of home he no longer has easy access to. Put next to the Althorp photo controversy, this paints a complicated picture. On one hand, reports of Harry quietly craving reconnection with his family and his homeland. On the other, a fresh controversy, whether intentional or not, that critics say has pushed the family further apart rather than closer together. It's worth remembering just how far this rift has traveled to get here. Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties in early 2020, moved across the Atlantic, and in the years since have given interviews, released a Netflix documentary series, and published a memoir, each one peeling back another layer of the family's private life for public consumption. Every one of those moments was framed by supporters as Harry finally telling his truth, and by critics as a betrayal of the family's long-standing code of silence. That history matters here, because it's the lens through which every new headline gets read. A photo that might, in another context, be dismissed as a private family moment gets filtered instead through years of accumulated distrust. Supporters of the Sussexes see a couple still being unfairly scrutinized for the most ordinary of parental choices. Critics see the latest chapter in a longer story of public relations warfare against the family Harry left behind. And caught in the middle of all of it are 2 young children, Archie and Lilibet, growing up largely outside the public eye, know to most of the world only through carefully chosen images like this one. Whatever else is true, it's hard not to notice the strange position they occupy, central figures in a story that isn't really about them at all, but about the decades-old relationship between their parents and the family their father was born into. So, let's bring it all together. A photograph. 2 children. A bouquet of flowers on the grounds of Althorp Estate, the same ground where Princess Diana has rested, deliberately shielded from public view, for nearly 30 years. To some, it was a mother honoring a grandmother her children never knew. To others, including a prominent royal columnist, it was a calculated, even defiant act, one that broke an unspoken family rule that William and Catherine have reportedly always honored in silence. Layer on top of that the timing. Coming shortly after a reportedly photo-free meeting with King Charles, and you have all the ingredients for exactly the kind of story that keeps the royal rumour mill turning: ambiguous motives, old grief, sibling tension, and a public more than willing to pick a side. Whether this was innocent or intentional may never be fully confirmed. But what it reveals, more than anything, is just how unhealed this family's wounds still are. Wounds that trace back to a princess who died trying to escape the cameras, and a legacy her children and grandchildren are still, in their own very different ways, trying to protect. So, what do you think? Was this a genuine, heartfelt tribute to a grandmother her children never got to meet, or was it, as critics suggest, a calculated move in a much longer game? Let me know your take in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the royal family's most complicated relationships, hit that like button, and subscribe for more documentaries breaking down the stories behind the headlines. And if you want to see the full story on Harry's reported homesickness, or the King Charles meeting that started it all, check the videos on screen now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.